Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a really fascinating corner of the internet, actually, a place where a groundbreaking scientific announcement sort of collided unexpectedly with, well, a whirlwind of controversy.
That's right. And we've got this compelling piece of source material to guide us. It's an audio excerpt titled Man Banned for Asking NASA About Aliens During Q&A, 22317.mp3.
Yeah, and it unpacks a very specific incident, something that unfolded during a NASA Q&A session.
What's really captivating here, I think, is how a question, a seemingly straightforward question about extraterrestrial life, managed to ignite this pretty fervent debate.
About information access, right? And public curiosity.
Exactly, and even allegations of censorship.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really unpack this particular event, look closely at the different viewpoints presented in our source material, and then maybe think about what this whole situation means for how we all engage with science,
Yeah.
and public discourse.
Okay, let's dive in. So we're talking about a NASA press conference, then a Reddit Ask Me Anything, an AMA, and a question that led to a pretty surprising, frankly, kind of dramatic outcome for the person asking it.
Yeah, it escalated quickly.
So to really get it, we need to start with the big news that kind of set the stage. Our source kicks off right there. NASA had just held a major press conference. What was the earth-shattering news they dropped that day?
Well, earth-shattering is about right. NASA announced they'd found not just one or two, but 7 new exoplanets, all orbiting a single star. TRAPPIST-1.
7. Wow.
Yeah, huge number. But the critical detail, and our source really highlights this, is that several of them were deemed potentially habitable.
Ah, okay. The magic words.
Exactly. Because when you hear potentially habitable, your mind doesn't just stop at, rocks floating in space.
No, definitely not.
It immediately sparks questions about what habitable really means, like liquid water, and by extension, the possibility of life.
Right. Life, that's the hook.
And this naturally, predictably, generated just immense public interest, a real tidal wave of curiosity. It kind of moved beyond pure science into something, well, much more profound for a lot of people.
Absolutely. The immediate leap for many isn't just about the planets themselves, but who or what might be living there.
Precisely.
So after this massive announcement, NASA did what they often do. They hosted an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, on Reddit,
Yeah.
to let the public talk directly to the scientists involved.
It's a good move for engagement, usually.
Usually. But this is exactly where our source material gets really, really interesting. A specific user who is identified as representing the website Collective Evolution decided to ask a very pointed question.
Right. And this is where the whole narrative takes a sharp turn. The source meticulously details Collective Evolution's exact query. They asked, and I'm quoting this directly from the audio we have,
Okay.
when is NASA going to reveal what is known about ET life? Former Defense Minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer, has said that there are at least 4 known alien species communicating with humans.
Citing Hellier straight off.
Yeah. Then, he is certainly not the only high-ranking whistleblower on this topic. When is NASA going to address this? Thanks.
Okay, so pretty direct.
Very direct. And the source explicitly frames this as a very respectable, clear-cut question. It cites a public figure, asks for specific info, and kind of implies NASA's holding something back.
Yeah, it's definitely not vague. It's a challenge.
A clear challenge, yeah.
So how did that land? In the middle of this AMA, how did the Reddit community initially react? Our source paints an intriguing picture of the first few minutes.
Well, initially, according to the source, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive.
Really? Positive?
Yeah, we're told the question quickly got around 20 upvotes in just half an hour. People were apparently chiming in, saying things like, a great idea, a great question.
So it struck a chord then?
It definitely seems like it. It suggests, a genuine initial resonance. It wasn't immediately shot down or mocked. There was support, reflecting that shared curiosity among at least some users there. There was clearly an appetite for that kind of question in that moment.
Okay, so initial support feels like an open dialogue. But as our source shows, that feeling didn't last long. What happened after that first wave of positivity, and what was the pretty stark consequence for Collective Evolution's Reddit account?
Yeah, this is where it gets dramatic. About 45 minutes after the question was posted and started gaining that initial traction, the source says a series of negative comments began to pop up.
The turn.
Exactly. And these weren't just disagreements. They were attacks on the question itself,
Uh-huh.
calling it silly and not serious, dismissing it as a conspiracy theory.
Okay, the classic dismissal.
Right. And other users jumped in, asserting NASA was there for serious questions only. basically trying to, police the conversation.
Gatekeeping the questions.
Kind of, yeah. And then came the really significant event, according to the source. Collective Evolution's account was permanently suspended directly after asking this question.
Permanently suspended, just like that.
Just like that. And they apparently got no response from NASA about the question itself and no explanation for why their account was suddenly banned.
Wow. Okay.
The source really emphasizes the abruptness, the lack of any communication, framing it as, well, a deliberate silencing.
That sudden shift, the quick suspension with no explanation, it is pretty striking. So how does our source interpret this? The speaker in the audio, identified as Tyler from Secure Team, argues pretty strongly that asking about aliens wasn't silly at all, especially right then. How does he justify its relevance?
Well, Tyler's argument, according to the source, is that the question about alien life has, and this is his phrasing, everything to do with the discovery of those potentially habitable exoplanets.
Okay, makes sense on the surface.
He argues that the immediate focus of major news outlets wasn't just the 7 planets or the star, but the huge potential for alien life being found on those planets.
That was definitely the buzz.
Right. For many people, maybe even most people following the story, that was the biggest question coming out of the announcement.
So he's saying the question wasn't out of left field, it was the logical next step for public curiosity.
Exactly. The source contends that NASA's announcement itself inherently leads to questions about life elsewhere. So Collective Evolution's query wasn't just relevant, it was arguably the most obvious next thought for anyone engaged with the news. Central, not peripheral.
Okay, but here's where the source takes it a step further, doesn't it? It doesn't just detail the incident. It uses this event as what they call smoking gun proof of something much bigger.
Yes, it does. It escalates the interpretation significantly.
What are the broader accusations being made here? What's the bigger picture they're painting, and what else do they cite?
The source interprets that account suspension as, and again, this is their term, first-hand smoking gun proof of an ongoing campaign to silence anybody who attempts to come in and ask the real questions.
A campaign. So organized effort.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
This incident, for them, isn't just about one Reddit AMA. It's presented as a clear example of how information is controlled, how inconvenient truths, as they see them, are suppressed.
And they link it to other things.
Oh, yeah. They explicitly connect it to a broader narrative of censorship in mainstream media and what the source calls fake news, where dissenting opinions get systematically discredited.
That's a big claim.
It is. The source goes on to claim that the government operates highly organized disinformation campaigns through YouTube, through social media, through online news media, and any other outlet they can to discredit, attack, and finally sway public opinion to support their agendas.
So this Reddit ban, in their view, is just one visible piece of that much larger alleged strategy.
Precisely. A clear, undeniable example, they argue, of that strategy in action, designed to control the narrative, especially around sensitive topics like, well, UFOs and potential alien contact.
And speaking of sensitive topics, the original question specifically mentioned Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian defense minister. Why him? Why is he significant to the source's argument here?
Right, Hellyer. The source treats him with considerable respect, describes him as a highly respected gentleman who basically came out and dropped a bombshell on the public about an alien presence.
A bombshell from a former defense minister definitely carries some weight.
That's exactly the source's point. They imply that a figure with his background, former minister of a G7 nation, lends serious credibility to these claims that might otherwise be easily dismissed.
And what did Hellyer claim according to the source?
He's quoted as stating that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for thousands of years.
4 species. For thousands of years.
That's the quote they use. And that the people of the world have the right to know what's going on. So, for the source, Hellyer isn't just some random person. He's presented as an authoritative insider.
Reinforcing their idea that information is being withheld.
Exactly. His testimony, in their view, adds gravity to the whole discussion about alleged cover-ups related to ET life.
Okay, so we have the big discovery, the public Q&A, the controversial question, the suspension, and then these really broad claims about censorship and disinformation, with figures like Hellyer cited as evidence. Despite all that controversy, what does the source say about just general human interest in this topic? Is this seen as just a niche thing?
Oh, not at all. The source strongly emphasizes that humanity's interest in alien life is highly engaged and, frankly, pervasive.
Okay. How do they back that up?
They point to, the massive online viewership numbers, countless subscriptions to channels and forums about UFOs and aliens, the sheer volume of searches, basically saying, look, people want to know about aliens. It's not some fringe obsession.
So they position the question itself as perfectly normal, given that interest.
Yes. They frame collective evolution's question as perfect, rational, and they really lament the idea that bringing up alien life gets you instantly labeled as part of a conspiracy theory coming from a bunch of tinfoil hat crazies.
Right.
The underlying argument is the curiosity is genuine, it's widespread, it's understandable, especially after news like the TRAPPIST-1 discovery. So they argue these questions deserve serious answers, not suppression, given how many people are asking them. It's presented as a core human question.
This deep dive, wow, it really shows how one scientific announcement can just crack open the door to these much larger, much more complex conversations, can't it?
Absolutely.
You go from planets to, profound curiosity about life out there, but then immediately slam into these really deep concerns about information control, about alleged censorship, who gets to ask what.
And who gets to decide what's a legitimate question versus what gets dismissed as conspiracy?
Yeah, that line seems increasingly blurry, especially online. And who draws that line? The source, of course, strongly implies it's being deliberately drawn by powerful forces to control certain narratives.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how the story built around an event can become just as significant, maybe even more significant than the event itself.
How people interpret it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
This incident, as presented in our source, becomes this powerful lens for viewing these broader anxieties we have about truth, transparency, authority,
Yeah.
which really raises a key question for you, the listener, as you navigate this, ocean of information we all swim in. In an age with so much conflicting stuff out there,
Yeah.
how do you personally decide which questions are serious and worth considering?
Good question.
And what role do you think public curiosity should play in shaping where science goes, what scientists talk about? When is a question about alien life just legitimate inquiry, pushing boundaries, and when, if ever, is it something else?
Lots to think about there. Keep those questions simmering as you continue your own explorations. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the fascinating sources you bring our way.